InvestorIdeas.com Podcasts.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com Podcasts, looking at cannabis news, stocks to watch, as well as insights from thought leaders and experts. In today's podcast, we look at announcements from BEV Enterprises Incorporated, trading on the CSE as BEV and the OTC as BVNNF, Fire and Flower Holdings Corporation, trading on the TSX as FAF, GB Sciences Incorporated, trading on the OTCQB as GBLX, as well as New Age Beverages Corporation, trading on the NASDAQ as NBEV. So, starting with BEV Enterprises, who announced today that it's exercised its option to acquire the right title and interest to Deeper Green trademark, the proprietary water-soluble cannabinoid powder ingredient developed by partner Greener Frontiers. Deeper Green technology expands BevCanna's ability to produce a portfolio of cannabis-infused beverage formats, said Emma Andrews, the Chief Commercialization Officer at BevCanna. The addition of a water-soluble powder allows us to offer consumers more variety in methods of consumption, which can now pair with various consumption occasions. Powdered drink mixes complement our existing expertise in ready-to-drink products and allow us to expand the innovation pipeline for our house brands and with white-label partners through contract manufacturing. Deeper Green converts extracted cannabis into a fast-acting, tasteless, odorless, water-soluble powdered ingredient and has been proven to be a stable ingredient that, when tested with cannabinoids, consistently delivers targeted concentrations within one batch and from batch to batch. Independent laboratory testing has also confirmed that Deeper Green precisely infused granular drink mixes and ready-to-drink beverages. So the tests have confirmed that Deeper Green and products infused with Deeper Green meet the criteria to pass the current cannabis-compliant regulations set out in California and will allow for reliable water-soluble infusion manufacturing processes and dosing confidence for consumers. So BevCanna, who I've mentioned a few times in the past, now getting another form of sort of product SKU available to them. One of the key things to sort of note there is that this has been approved for the California market, which does have very different regulations than almost all the other states, and doesn't have a lot of consistency when it's come to their edibles products. They have started to update their regulations, but again, it's still quite limited, especially when we're comparing this to the Canadian market. So as much as whenever we're looking at any products from the US or any international markets, really you have to pay attention to sort of the style of the product and where it's being approved by, as again, some of these international markets, and again the Canadian market, are having much stricter regulations as far as how you can label and sort of create your product. So that product might not be able to transfer out of the California market, but the California market is quite big, so I'm sure that's not an issue right now for BevCanna. But at least for moving forward, it might have some issues or have to be remodeled to enter into different states, or especially into, again, the Canadian Cannabis 2.0 products. But it does continue with the trend of people focusing on beverages, which would be what a lot of the announcements today are about. Moving next to Fire and Flower Holdings Corporation, who announced that it has begun selling new Cannabis 2.0 product formats in retail stores in the province of Saskatchewan. So the company is among the first retailers in Canada to be selling these new product formats, and this has been achieved through a private wholesale model in the province of Saskatchewan, where the company's wholly owned distribution business, Open Fields Distribution, purchases from and negotiates prices directly with the licensed producers. So the new products in Fire and Flower's assortment will be composed of edibles, including gummies, mints, and chocolates, and concentrate vaporizers in both all-in-one and cartridge formats. And Fire and Flower's initial assortment of Cannabis 2.0 products in the province is anticipated to include offerings from the following licensed producers and brands. So Afria, Aurora, Doses, Kronos, The Green Organic Dutchman, High Park, Organigram, Redican, and Sundial. With Fire and Flower being one of the first retailers in Canada to stock new cannabis formats, this exemplifies the clear benefits of the private distribution model, including prices, access, and diversity of product within the province of Saskatchewan, shared Trevor Fencott, Fire and Flower's Chief Executive Officer. We've demonstrated leadership through establishing Open Fields Distribution, which supplies both the Fire and Flower retail network and external accounts within the province of Saskatchewan. There is significant demand for these new product formats in the market, and we look forward to bringing these products to our lower consumers. So Fire and Flower will continue to monitor consumer preferences for new product formats using the Hi-Fire digital retail and analytic platform to judiciously manage the product assortment and inventory on hand. And as new products, including beverages and topicals, become available, Fire and Flower expects to include these products in the company's assortment. So Fire and Flower, who I mentioned, uses their Hi-Fire system before, and has established a pretty significant retail footprint in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Now being able to utilize the sort of different availabilities afforded in those provinces. One of the main ones that was obviously mentioned there is the private retail distribution, which is a big thing for Saskatchewan as an advantage over the other provinces when it comes to sort of the retail infrastructure. And it's also the main reason that Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta have sort of led the sales when it comes to cannabis in Canada. Again, I don't know if that's going to be changing in the coming months if Ontario and BC start adapting new policies to actually keep up competitively with the other provinces and to also sort of allow a more, I don't know, accessible opportunity for businesses really in those areas, because it is forcing a lot of these companies like Fire and Flower or really anyone retail focused to look to the Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan provinces instead of, again, BC and Ontario, just because right now it's been quite slow to get anything going there. And even with the Cannabis 2.0 products, most people are expecting those aren't going to be hitting BC and Ontario probably until mid to late January. So getting in ahead of things is going to be sort of an advantage, obviously, and most likely, just like with sort of the first layout of cannabis products in Canada, just like with the 2.0 products, looking at Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan is going to be where you're going to get most of your data with regards to retail, with regards to different sales SKUs, and also with regards to sort of consumer preferences moving forward, as a lot of the other things are going to be inconsistent, a mix of online and retail sales, and also quite slow to market when it comes to products hitting shelves. But it's good to see that, again, some areas of Canada are at least on it, and we'll have products on shelves quite soon. Next, looking at GB Sciences, who announced significant preclinical results for their Parkinson's disease formulations for the midterm report for their preclinical study being performed by Dr. Lee Ellis of the National Research Council in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. So GB Sciences PD formulations were able to reduce behavioral changes associated with the loss of dopamine-producing neurons, which underlies the pathology of Parkinson's disease in the animal model. The first phase of testing will study the mechanism of actions on these promising formulations, which could potentially help patients with the debilitating disease. And the combined direct and indirect costs associated with Parkinson's disease are estimated at $52 billion in the US alone. Several of GB Science's mixtures were effective. In fact, our most effective mixture was able to rescue the PD-like behavioral changes to the point where the treated animals' behavior was back to baseline. In addition, our PD formulas produced negligible side effects, which is equally important, explained Dr. Andrea Small-Howard, the Chief Science Officer and Director of both GB Sciences Incorporated and GBS Global Biopharma Incorporated. These important preclinical results will be included as proof of concept in GB Sciences' investigational new drug application with the US FDA in order to enter into our first in-man human clinical trial as early as next year. So GB Sciences, best known for their Epidiolex, and now focusing on a Parkinson's-related formula. As far as how they've sort of continued to play out in the cannabis industry, they are one of the few companies that's focusing on actually following this like it's an actual pharmaceutical company or a biopharma company, and getting through all the proper approval, getting the proper testing done, the preclinical and clinical studies, as well as working hand in hand with the FDA and making sure everything is transparent and disclosed to them. So this is another good step, as we saw with Epidiolex, that did have a pretty significant impact on the cannabis industry as well as the CBD industry, and also did have a lot of good impacts with regards to epilepsy. And so now moving forward, we would hope to see the same sort of results with regards to Parkinson's and their formulation for that. And GB Sciences seems to be continuing to be the leader as far as this sort of style of formulation for the cannabis industry, and probably moving forward will continue to be that leader until other bigger biopharma companies start entering into the space, whether through acquisitions or partnerships. But for right now, they're definitely the ones leading the way, and also the company that's really assisting with allowing regulations to move forward at a bit more of a normal pace. Because again, they are showing proof of concept that these can be treated as any other type of medicine, which is something that's been quite difficult for the medical community to adopt with regards to cannabis. And lastly, looking at New Age Beverages Corporation, who announced the launch of its hemp portfolio in Australia and New Zealand, and they also plan on actually launching this later in some of the Asian markets in South Korea as well as Japan. So, under the umbrella of its health sciences division, New Age received approval and has begun selling its premium portfolio of hemp oils, creams, and lotions in Australia and New Zealand. The launch initially features 3 distinct products: the Enhanced Hemp Body Cream, the Enhanced Hemp Roll-On Gel, and the Enhanced Hemp Oil. And these products will be sold immediately through more than 2,000 direct-to-consumer distribution partners across Australia and New Zealand. Enhanced Hemp is proving to be one of the most talked about product lines we've launched, said Brent Willis, Chief Executive Officer of New Age. Receiving approval and beginning to sell our products in these markets further puts off the right path to become a leading player in the hemp CBD industry in Australia and New Zealand. New Age's research and development teams and scientists worked exhaustively over the past year to develop the hemp scientific formulations, and both meet the regulatory requirements of markets like Australia and New Zealand, but also maintain the efficacy, strength, and benefit of New Age's full-strength CBD formulas. Enhanced hemp products were designed and developed to meet stringent government hemp CBD regulations for safety, purity, and efficacy, said Laura Kimball, Director in Product Development. The hemp in these products is sourced from industrial hemp grown in the USA, and the mature seed is then carefully processed to ensure that it's pure and completely free of THC. So this is what I was sort of talking about earlier with the BEV beverages that they've obtained in California for the rights to produce that product, and how that's really only approved in California. So New Age Beverages, another American company, but focusing on that international expansion and realizing that, yeah, for certain products, they do need to hit certain standards and make sure that they're following certain purity qualifications, certain quality controls, as well as certain testing regulations, so they can actually sell these products on the international market. And again, they are planning expanding into some Southeast Asian markets as well, after the success, obviously, of this, or the failure, depending on how it gets received by the Australian and New Zealand community. But so far, in Australia and in other parts of that area of the world, the sort of Southeast Asia and Pacific area, there has been at least strong consumer demand for these products. But again, the regulations for those environments are quite strict and quite difficult to sort of get into. So when you do see these companies enter into those spaces, they're definitely going to have a significant first mover advantage. And again, moving forward, they might also be able to enter into a lot more international markets because they've already sort of made sure that they're hitting all the right sort of regulations to transfer into different markets. So that's all for today's podcast. Enjoy the rest of your week. That's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and TuneIn. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law. Our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.